Artemis Fowl is the representation of Disney's latest attempt to start a franchise that isn't Marvel, Star Wars, or princesses. It seems like anytime Disney tries something a little different or somewhat original and it isn't animated, it always never turns out great, especially in the last 5 years. Their reliance has been on those other blockbusters I mentioned before, Pixar, and the live-action remakes of their classic films. Artemis Fowl seemed to have a lot of promise based on the trailer. It had a neat look, and being based on a long-running book series that has a dedicated fan base and a wealth of material, it seemed like the perfect chance for Disney to finally get their own version of Harry Potter. I honestly know nothing about Artemis Fowl. I know it's a series, and I know it's an origin story about a villain, which is a pretty unique angle. I see movies all the time without reading the original stories, so I assume I'd be able to come into this fresh. Directed by Kenneth Branagh, best known for his Shakespeare performances and other mildly successful blockbusters like Murder on the Orient Express, Thor, and Jack Ryan's Shadow Recruit, this was originally supposed to be released in 2019 but was pushed back for whatever reason. They probably feared that it would lose money, but after the pandemic, the theatrical release was scrapped altogether and was instead put on Disney+, home for new movies that Disney deems too risky for the box office. Now we'll never get a true impression of this film's success, but based on the audience reaction so far, maybe this is a thing that was best left quiet all along. Artemis Fowl Jr. is the son of Artemis Fowl, played by Colin Farrell, a secret, infamous thief who gets captured by a hooded figure who demands the return of the stolen Oculus, which was taken by the senior Fowl years prior. So the adventure is off with Artemis Jr., a fairy named Holly Short, a dwarf named Mulch, played by Josh Gad, and the butler and his niece that barely gets any screen time. Like a lot of these young adult adaptations, there's so much setup and exposition that really drags everything down, as if they're preparing for more movies to come out, even though we have to wait to see how this one does. Instead of experiencing this very special environment, which that's a bit of a stretch description, since the world isn't too unique, it kind of looks like the underground world of Wakanda, but we instead have to focus on constant explanations of the plot, the devices, the motivations, the past, the future. So much has to be discussed, and it drains all the charisma and fun of the proceedings. It literally begins with a narration from Josh Gad's character, who's already been captured and is shown through black and white footage. There doesn't seem to be an immediate reason for this choice other than to differentiate the periods of time that these scenes and the rest of the movie takes place. Then most of the film takes place at Fowl Manor. We get a few moments in the fairy world, which looks awesome, but for the most part we watch them conversate in this normal, everyday looking mansion. Kenneth Branagh's films are usually visual treats, so it's unfortunate that we have to stare, for the most part, at furniture and bedrooms. The characters are never given a chance to develop. I'm not even sure how to truthfully critique their acting or presence because they're basically there as narrators and audio footnotes for a movie that already has a narrator. I'm not sure why there's even an ensemble because we don't need this many additional side roles if none of them are going to get proper screen time or involvement. There's a supposed big moment at the finale where a character nearly dies, and he's only saved by a contrivance that's as lame as that moment when Ash is brought back to life in Pokemon the movie. I seriously hate when flicks do this, because we all see it coming, but what's worse is that it happens with someone we barely know. Even the character's immediate relative has almost no impact from her uncle's near-death experience, so why even have it here? There's not really a structure to anything. It feels like one giant first act with a sudden Hail Mary climax that is so uneventful and confusing and makes me not want to seek these books out. I know this is probably a horrible interpretation of the source material, but how could it possibly fall apart this bad? Disney doesn't have the best live action stuff, but it's not normally this bad, and they had good creators behind it. It feels like one of those spy movies where there's a lot of exposition that doesn't really feel important or memorable for the basic synopsis, but at least spy movies usually have good dialogue and interesting characters. Artemis Fowl lacks everything needed for a fun, imaginative fantasy. The only scene I remember is when Josh Gad suddenly has a mouth that doesn't adhere to real-world physics, and he eats a tunnel through the ground, and the dirt passes right through him. I never thought I would need a visual representation of dirt passing through a fantasy creature's body, but Artemis Fowl delivers on that. It's just plain awful, forgettable, and doesn't take any chances. I was expecting a villain origin story with a wicked, calculating little kid that has fun with his powers. I'm not sure if that's what the book is like, but even a non-fan can realize that this adaptation doesn't do it justice. I guess I'm glad I didn't pay money to see this, but instead got it with everything else already offered on Disney+. Now I have to make this month's bill worth it. How about I watch that 6-part documentary on the making of Frozen 2? That seems needlessly excessive for Frozen 2. Maybe they should do a documentary on how many times Disney has rescheduled their 2020 movies, like The New Mutants, which I believe will never see the light of day. If it's anything like Artemis Fowl, maybe it's best left unreleased. Thanks for watching the video, and special shout out to Anthony, Anna, Lukas, NolanCho, Ryan, and Robert for the support on Patreon. By joining my Patreon, you can get exclusive videos and blogs, and for only $7, you can request your own movie review. I hope you stick around, cinephile, and have a happy, productive day.